What if the very things women do without thinking drive men silently crazy, not because they're wrong, but because they clash with the deepest layers of the masculine psyche? According to Carl Jung, these tensions aren't just personal, they're archetypal. Carl Jung, the pioneering psychologist, revealed that men and women aren't just divided by biology, but by invisible forces in the unconscious. He called these the anima, the inner feminine in men, and animus, the inner masculine in women. When these energies collide in relationships, frustration erupts. Today, we're uncovering 5 common behaviors women often embrace, that men secretly resent, not because of malice, but because they trigger primal psychological tensions. These aren't stereotypes, they're patterns Jung observed in the human collective unconscious. And by the end, you'll see how this knowledge isn't about changing who you are, but understanding why these clashes happen in the first place. Number 1. Overcommunication. Carl Jung observed that one of the most fundamental differences between masculine and feminine psychological expression lies in communication. Women, he noted, often process emotions and thoughts by verbalizing them, talking through feelings, exploring nuances, and seeking connection through dialogue. For many women, speaking isn't just about conveying information, it's a way of understanding their own inner world and bonding with others. This tendency is deeply tied to the anima, the inner feminine principle that values emotional flow and relational harmony. However, this same behavior can trigger resistance in men, not because they don't care, but because their psychological framework operates differently. From a Jungian perspective, the masculine psyche is more inclined toward action, silence, or internal processing. Men often approach communication with a problem-solving mindset. If there's an issue, they want to identify it, fix it, and move on. Prolonged discussion of emotions without a clear resolution can feel frustrating or even invasive to them, as if they're being pulled into an endless loop of feelings with no exit. This isn't a sign of emotional coldness, but rather a reflection of how many men are wired to conserve energy and focus on tangible outcomes. When a woman engages in what Jung called anima projection, expecting her partner to mirror her own need for verbal processing, it can create tension, as the man may feel overwhelmed or even emasculated by the expectation to engage in a way that doesn't align with his natural instincts. The resistance men feel toward overcommunication isn't just about personal preference. It's rooted in deeper archetypal patterns. The masculine archetype, as Jung described it, thrives on clarity, purpose, and boundaries. Too much unstructured emotional dialogue can feel like a breach of those boundaries, leaving men feeling drained or cornered. This dynamic explains why some men withdraw or shut down in response to what women might consider normal, even necessary, conversation. It's not that men don't have emotions. They absolutely do, but their way of navigating them often involves solitude, physical activity, or quiet reflection rather than verbal dissection. Understanding this difference is crucial for both genders. For women, recognizing that a man's reluctance to engage in lengthy emotional talk isn't rejection, it's often self-preservation. For men, becoming aware of why they react this way can help them communicate their needs without resentment. Jung's insight reminds us that these tensions aren't personal failures, but natural clashes between two equally valid ways of experiencing the world. The key lies in finding balance, honoring a woman's need for expression while respecting a man's need for space, so that communication becomes a bridge rather than a battleground. Number 2. Emotional indirectness. One of the most common sources of tension between men and women lies in the realm of unspoken expectations, those moments when feelings are hinted at rather than stated outright. Carl Jung's concept of the animus, the inner masculine aspect within a woman's psyche, plays a crucial role here. While the animus can empower women with logic and assertiveness, it can also manifest in more subtle ways, particularly when emotions are involved. Many women, often unconsciously, communicate their needs or frustrations indirectly through tone, silence, or seemingly offhand remarks, rather than expressing them directly. This isn't necessarily manipulation, it's frequently a learned behavior shaped by social conditioning that discourages women from being too blunt or confrontational. Yet, this indirectness can create a minefield of confusion for men who tend to operate on more explicit, straightforward communication. For men, this ambiguity can be deeply frustrating. The masculine psyche, as Jung observed, is often oriented toward clarity and resolution. When faced with passive-aggressive cues, a sigh, a pointed silence, or a cryptic "I'm fine," men are left scrambling to decode meanings that were never plainly stated. This dynamic triggers what Jung called the shadow conflict, where unexpressed emotions create a disconnect between what is said and what is truly felt. The shadow, representing the unconscious and often repressed aspects of the psyche, lurks beneath these interactions, turning minor misunderstandings into full-blown tensions. A man may grow resentful not because he dismisses his partner's feelings, but because the lack of directness leaves him feeling set up to fail, as if he's being tested without knowing the rules. This clash isn't just about communication styles, it's a collision of archetypal energies. The feminine principle often seeks to preserve harmony and avoid outright conflict, which can lead to sugarcoating or sidestepping difficult truths. Meanwhile, the masculine principle values honesty and directness, even if it risks confrontation. When a woman suppresses her true feelings to keep the peace, it may feel like emotional safety to her, but to a man, it can come across as inauthentic or even deceptive. Over time, this pattern erodes trust, as men begin to question whether they're getting the full story, and women feel increasingly unseen because their hints go unrecognized. The solution, as Jung might suggest, lies in integration. For women, this means recognizing when the animus's more assertive side could serve them, not by adopting masculine bluntness, but by finding a balance between tact and clarity. For men, it involves developing patience and emotional attunement, learning to read between the lines without resentment. Both genders must acknowledge that indirect communication often stems from fear of rejection, fear of conflict, or fear of vulnerability. By creating a space where honesty is met with understanding rather than defensiveness, these shadow dynamics can be brought into the light. After all, Jung's work reminds us that true connection isn't about mind reading. It's about courage, the courage to speak openly and the courage to listen deeply. Number 3. Social comparison. One of the most striking differences between masculine and feminine psychological patterns lies in how each gender approaches social relationships. Women, Jung observed, often have a natural inclination toward what he called the collective feminine, in orientation toward community, relational harmony, and subtle hierarchies within social groups. This manifests in a tendency to compare themselves to others, whether measuring their friendships, romantic relationships, career progress, or even physical appearance against peers. Far from being mere vanity or insecurity, this comparative mindset stems from deep evolutionary and psychological roots. In ancestral environments, a woman's survival often depended on her ability to read social dynamics, maintain alliances, and secure her position within the group. Today, while the stakes may be lower, this instinct persists in how many women instinctively assess their standing in various social spheres. For men, this constant social benchmarking often feels foreign and frustrating. The masculine psyche, as Jung described it, tends to value individuality and self-defined success over communal positioning. Where a woman might naturally notice and discuss who said what to whom at a gathering, a man may genuinely wonder why such details matter at all. This isn't about emotional intelligence, both genders possess it equally, but about fundamental differences in what captures psychological attention. When men witness women engaging in social comparison, They frequently perceive it as unnecessary drama or, worse, as a sign of insecurity. To the male mind, which often operates on more autonomous principles, this behavior can seem like a distraction from what really matters: personal integrity, concrete achievements, and self-determined goals. The tension arises when these differing approaches collide. A woman sharing her observations about social dynamics may be seeking connection and validation, engaging in what feels like normal relational maintenance. But her male partner might interpret this as gossip or pettiness, missing the deeper psychological function these conversations serve. Similarly, when a man dismisses his partner's concerns about how they're perceived as a couple or family, he's not being insensitive, he's operating from a psychological framework that places less value on communal metrics. This disconnect can lead to mutual frustration. She feels he doesn't care about their social world. He feels she's overly concerned with others' opinions. Jung would argue that both perspectives contain wisdom. The feminine approach fosters social cohesion and ensures no one gets left behind, while the masculine emphasis on individuality prevents groupthink and encourages innovation. The challenge lies in recognizing that neither approach is superior, they're complementary. A woman's social awareness can help navigate complex interpersonal situations, while a man's focus on self-definition can provide stability against the tides of social opinion. The healthiest relationships find ways to honor both, acknowledging the importance of social connections without becoming enslaved by them, and valuing independent thought while remaining engaged with community. Ultimately, this difference reflects the beautiful complexity of human psychology. What one gender perceives as natural and important, the other may view as trivial or exhausting, not because either is wrong, but because they're wired to notice and value different aspects of the human experience. The Jungian perspective invites us to see these tensions not as problems to solve, but as opportunities to expand our understanding of ourselves and each other. When we approach these differences with curiosity rather than judgment, we open the door to deeper connection and mutual growth. Number 4. Overnurturing. The impulse to nurture and care for others is one of the most beautiful expressions of the feminine principle, yet when this tendency becomes excessive, it can create unexpected tension in relationships. Carl Jung's concept of the Great Mother archetype helps explain this dynamic, the primordial image of the all-giving, all-encompassing maternal figure that exists in our collective unconscious. While this archetype represents life, nourishment, and unconditional love in its positive form, its shadow side manifests as smothering, overprotection, and emotional engulfment. Many women, often without realizing it, may slip into this mothering role with their partners, offering unsolicited advice, micromanaging daily tasks, or expressing concern that borders on control. What begins as loving care can subtly transform into something more complicated, touching on deep psychological vulnerabilities in the masculine psyche. For men, this overnurturing often triggers a primal resistance. The masculine identity, as Jung observed, is fundamentally built on autonomy, competence, and self-reliance. When a woman consistently steps in to manage a man's life, whether it's what he eats, how he dresses, or how he spends his time, it doesn't feel like love to him. Instead, it registers as a quiet erosion of his adult agency, a message that he's incapable of handling his own affairs. This is why men often respond with withdrawal or irritation to what women perceive as simple acts of care. The packed lunch lovingly prepared becomes evidence he can't be trusted to feed himself. The reminder about a doctor's appointment implies he's irresponsible. The reorganized closet suggests his methods are inadequate. Each well-intentioned act, when excessive, chips away at his sense of autonomous adulthood. This dynamic becomes particularly charged because it activates what Jung called the mother complex, unconscious patterns formed by our earliest experiences with maternal care. For a man, his partner's overnurturing may unconsciously recall childhood feelings of dependency that his adult self is wired to reject. The more she mothers, the more he feels reduced to a boy rather than respected as a man, creating a vicious cycle where her increased care triggers his increased resistance. This explains why some men paradoxically pull away from the very attention and affection they crave. It's not the love they reject, but the infantilizing quality it sometimes carries. The masculine soul thrives on being needed as an equal partner, not as a child requiring supervision. The solution lies in conscious awareness of these archetypal patterns. For women, it involves examining whether their caregiving comes from a place of authentic love or from unconscious anxiety, the need to feel indispensable, or cultural conditioning that equates womanhood with self-sacrifice. True nurturing respects the other person's autonomy. It offers without imposing, cares without controlling. For men, it requires distinguishing between genuine smothering and normal relationship consideration, and communicating needs clearly rather than withdrawing passive-aggressively. Both partners benefit from recognizing that mature love exists between equals, not between caretaker and dependent. At its core, this tension points to a beautiful opportunity for growth. The healthiest relationships allow both partners to express care without domination, to receive love without feeling diminished. When a woman tempers her nurturing instincts with respect for her partner's competence, and when a man can accept care without perceiving it as a threat to his autonomy, they create space for a more balanced, adult connection. Jung's wisdom reminds us that love, to endure, must honor both the need for connection and the equally profound need for individual sovereignty within the relationship. Number 5. Emotional contagion. One of the most profound yet challenging aspects of male-female dynamics lies in how emotions are experienced and processed differently between the genders. Carl Jung's concept of anima possession describes a state where a man becomes overwhelmed by feminine emotional energy to the point where it disrupts his natural psychological equilibrium. This often occurs when a woman's strong emotional expressions, whether joy, sadness, anger, or anxiety, flood the relational space with such intensity that her partner finds himself involuntarily swept up in the emotional current. What begins as her personal experience of feelings suddenly becomes his emotional reality too, creating a phenomenon Jung recognized as particularly destabilizing for the masculine psyche. The masculine mind typically relates to emotions differently than the feminine, not less deeply, but more contained. Where a woman might process feelings by expressing them outwardly, a man often does so through action, solitude, or logical analysis. This isn't suppression, but a different rhythm of emotional metabolism. When confronted with a partner's intense emotional waves, many men initially try to fix the situation with solutions, only to become frustrated when this pragmatic approach fails to calm the storm. As the emotional atmosphere grows more charged, the man may feel his usual anchors of rationality and emotional separation slipping away. This loss of psychological footing triggers what Jung warned about, the dissolution of necessary masculine boundaries in the face of overwhelming feminine emotional energy. This dynamic becomes particularly destructive when it forms a recurring pattern. The man, fearing emotional engulfment, begins to armor himself against his partner's feelings, building walls where bridges are needed. The woman, sensing this withdrawal, may amplify her emotional expression to break through his defenses, inadvertently reinforcing the very cycle she hopes to stop. Jung saw this as a classic case of enantiodromia, the unconscious swing to the opposite extreme, where the man becomes either emotionally rigid or equally volatile in reaction. Neither extreme serves the relationship, as both partners lose access to their full humanity, She constrained by his emotional withdrawal, he drowning in feelings he doesn't know how to process. The path forward requires conscious work from both sides. Women benefit from recognizing that intense emotional expression, while valid and important, can have a visceral impact on their partners that isn't about lack of care, but about fundamental differences in emotional architecture. Finding ways to express feelings without complete emotional flooding allows space for the man to remain present rather than defensive. Men, meanwhile, must develop greater emotional tolerance without abandoning their natural boundaries, learning to be with strong emotions without either fleeing or being overwhelmed by them. This middle path is what Jung called individuation, the ability to stay connected to others while maintaining one's psychological integrity. At its deepest level, this tension holds an invitation for both partners to grow. The woman learns that true emotional intimacy doesn't require complete emotional merging, while the man discovers that healthy boundaries don't necessitate emotional detachment. When balanced, these energies create a relationship where both can meet in authentic connection. She free to feel deeply without fearing she'll drown him, he able to remain present without fearing he'll lose himself. This is the alchemical marriage Jung envisioned, not the elimination of differences, but the sacred union where masculine and feminine energies honor and elevate each other's unique gifts. At the heart of Carl Jung's exploration of masculine and feminine dynamics lies a profound truth that transcends gender roles and societal expectations. These tensions we've examined, from communication styles to emotional expression, are not flaws in relationships, but rather sacred mirrors revealing where we remain unconsciously divided within ourselves. Jung's genius was in recognizing that what often manifests as conflict between men and women is actually an external reflection of the internal struggle between our own anima and animus, the feminine and masculine energies that exist within every individual regardless of biological sex. This perspective transforms relationship challenges from personal failings into initiations, opportunities to become more whole by embracing aspects of ourselves we've neglected or rejected. The path to healing these tensions begins with understanding that projection is at work whenever we feel particularly irritated or enamored with qualities in our partner. When a man becomes frustrated with a woman's emotional expression, he's often encountering his own undeveloped relationship with feeling. When a woman feels exasperated by a man's emotional reserve, she's facing her own disconnection from stillness and containment. These moments of friction are actually spiritual assignments calling us to reclaim those disowned parts of ourselves rather than demand our partners change to accommodate our imbalances. This is the essence of Jung's concept of individuation, the lifelong process of integrating our conscious and unconscious aspects to become more complete human beings. True relationship transformation occurs when we stop using our partner as a scapegoat for our own psychological work. A woman who learns to meet her own emotional needs with compassion rather than demand her partner provide constant validation finds her relationships becoming less volatile. A man who develops his capacity for emotional presence without abandoning his natural boundaries discovers his partner actually becomes more secure, not less. This is the alchemy of conscious relationship. As each individual does their own inner work, the space between them becomes charged with possibility rather than tension. The paradox Jung uncovered is that the more whole we become as individuals, the more deeply we can connect with others. This journey toward integration requires courage to face our own shadows. The nurturing woman must confront her fear of being unnecessary. The logical man must face his terror of emotional overwhelm. The socially attuned woman must examine her anxiety about standing alone. The independent man must meet his dread of dependency. These are not easy reckonings, but they lead to what Jung called the transcendent function, that magical third position that emerges when we hold the tension between opposites long enough for a new consciousness to emerge. In relationship terms, this manifests as partnerships that are neither emotionally smothering nor coldly detached, neither chaotically merged nor rigidly separated, but something entirely new, a dance of connection that honors both individuality and intimacy. The ultimate purpose of these challenges is not to achieve some perfect, conflict-free relationship, but to use our partnerships as the most profound spiritual crucibles available to us. Each argument about communication, each tension around emotional expression, each frustration with differing needs is an invitation to grow beyond our psychological comfort zones. When approached with this awareness, relationships stop being about finding someone who makes us happy and become sacred journeys of awakening. This is what transforms ordinary love into what Jung called the mysterium conjunctionis, the sacred marriage where two whole people come together not out of lack, but from abundance, not to complete each other, but to celebrate and challenge each other's wholeness. In this light, the very behaviors that frustrate us most in our partners become our greatest teachers. The emotionally expressive woman teaches the contained man about vitality and passion. The boundaried man teaches the emotionally fluid woman about grounding and discernment. The socially aware woman teaches the autonomous man about connection and community. The self-reliant man teaches the nurturing woman about freedom and trust. These are the gifts waiting on the other side of our frustrations, available only when we stop demanding change from our partners and start undertaking the more courageous work of changing ourselves. Jung's vision offers hope that our relationships need not be battlegrounds between masculine and feminine, but temples where both energies are honored as sacred. The balance isn't found in suppressing our natural tendencies, but in expanding our capacity to hold more complexity. A woman doesn't need to become less emotional, but more skilled at navigating her emotional landscape without drowning others. A man doesn't need to become less rational, but more adept at bringing his reasoning into relationship with feeling. This is the sacred middle path where true intimacy lives, not in the elimination of differences, but in the celebration of how those differences call us to become more than we were before we loved. The journey toward healthier relationships begins with practical steps that honor both self-awareness and compassion. For women, the first essential practice is developing conscious observation of their natural tendencies without judgment or self-rejection. This means noticing when the impulse to overcommunicate arises, not to suppress it but to question its origin. Is this coming from a genuine need for connection, or from anxiety seeking reassurance? Women can cultivate the powerful practice of pausing before expressing every passing emotion, creating space to discern what truly needs to be shared versus what might be processed internally. This isn't about becoming less emotional, but about developing emotional discernment. When indirect communication patterns emerge, women can practice the art of gentle honesty, expressing needs clearly while still maintaining their natural warmth and relational sensitivity. The goal isn't to adopt masculine directness wholesale, but to find an authentic middle ground where both clarity and kindness coexist. For men, the foundational practice is cultivating patience, both with their partners and with themselves as they navigate emotional landscapes that may feel foreign. This begins with recognizing that emotional expression from women isn't an attack or manipulation, but a different language of connection. When feeling overwhelmed by a partner's emotions, men can practice grounding techniques, taking a moment to breathe and center themselves rather than immediately withdrawing or trying to fix the situation. Developing what Jung called the feeling function doesn't require abandoning logic, but rather expanding one's capacity to be present with emotions without being overwhelmed by them. Men might start with small steps, like practicing reflective listening, "I hear your feeling," before offering solutions. This builds emotional muscles gradually, in ways that feel authentic rather than forced. Both genders benefit tremendously from the practice of curiosity over criticism. When a partner's behavior triggers frustration, instead of reacting immediately, pause and ask, what part of myself might this be revealing? The emotionally expressive woman might ask herself why she feels compelled to fill every silence. The solution-oriented man might examine his discomfort with unresolved emotional states. This isn't about assigning blame, but about using relationship tensions as mirrors for self-discovery. Keeping a journal can help track these patterns and insights over time, revealing growth that might otherwise go unnoticed in daily interactions. Another powerful tool is creating intentional communication agreements. Perhaps designating certain times for emotional check-ins that work for both partners' rhythms, not when one person is exhausted or distracted. Women might agree to distill their core message first before expanding, while men might commit to staying present for a set duration before needing space. These compromises work best when framed as experiments rather than rigid rules, allowing for adjustment as both partners learn what works. Ultimately, the most transformative practice is shifting from "you need to change" to "how can we grow together?" This reframe transforms relationship challenges from power struggles into shared adventures in psychological and spiritual development. When a woman feels the urge to mother her partner, she might instead ask how she can support his autonomy. When a man feels the impulse to withdraw from emotional intensity, he might challenge himself to stay present just a little longer. Small, consistent efforts in these directions create compound interest over time, building relationships where both partners feel both free and connected, both understood and challenged to evolve. The alchemy happens in daily micro-moments, choosing understanding over righteousness, curiosity over assumption, compassion over criticism. These choices, repeated consistently, gradually rewire relationship patterns at the neurological level. What begins as conscious effort eventually becomes natural response, transforming former sources of tension into opportunities for deeper connection. This is the practical magic of Jungian psychology applied to daily life, not as abstract theory, but as living wisdom that breathes new life into our most important relationships. As we reach the end of this exploration into Jungian relationship dynamics, we're left with a powerful invitation, not just to understand these patterns intellectually, but to engage with them personally. Which of these tensions feel most familiar in your own life? Where do you recognize yourself in these descriptions of masculine and feminine energies playing out? The comment section below awaits your experiences and insights, because it's in sharing our stories that these psychological concepts come alive with real meaning. Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to make sense of their own relationship challenges. For those who feel called to dive deeper into these transformative ideas, Carl Jung's groundbreaking work The Psychology of the Unconscious provides a profound foundation. This seminal text takes us beyond surface-level interactions into the archetypal forces that shape all human connection, offering timeless wisdom for anyone seeking more conscious, fulfilling relationships. The journey of self-discovery doesn't end here, it's only just beginning, and Jung's words continue to light the way nearly a century after he first wrote them. Let me leave you with one final provocative question to ponder. Could those very behaviors you find most frustrating in your partner actually be mirrors reflecting back your own hidden shadows? The qualities that irritate us most in others are often the disowned parts of ourselves we've yet to make peace with. When a man bristles at emotional expression, might he be encountering his own suppressed vulnerability? When a woman reacts to emotional distance, might she be facing her fear of autonomy? This is the revolutionary gift of Jungian psychology. It transforms our relationships into the most powerful spiritual practice available to us, where every conflict contains the seeds of our next breakthrough in self-awareness and wholeness. The path to deeper connection always begins with courageous self-reflection. Are you ready to see your relationships and yourself in this radical new light? The choice, as always, is yours.